Cesaria Maritima is the location of the first Jewish revolt, as said by Yoel Berkowitz, my tour guide. And it's also Herod's castle, the naval base. As you can see, it's very strategic because it's right by the water. And Israel is located in a very important area where down below is Egypt, and then right here would be like Mesopotamia, which is known to be very fertile and versatile. It's strategic to the Romans with Pontius Pilate. Is everyone familiar with Pontius Pilate? Okay, perfect. And then that's Caesarea Maritima. We didn't get to go to, actually I think we went to Philippi, not sure, don't remember. Caesarea Philippi, the importance here is that Yeshua was revealed to be the promised Messiah in Matthew 16:13-20. And then Peter here also declares Yeshua as the Christ, the Son of the living God. So it's really important to remember that there's two Caesareas when people are talking about it, because they have two different historical backgrounds and scriptural backgrounds. And then also Yeshua's ministry started here. Next. Perfect. So we're going to have a walkthrough with Caesarea Maritima. Welcome. It is very windy. It is, I would say 22 Celsius. So make sure to bring an umbrella with you if you're scared of the sun. And then make sure to have sunscreen with you as well. So we are going to go through the theater right here. And once we pass through the theater, we're going to go through the palace. And once we get out of the palace without dying, we're going to head to the arena, where we also might die. It depends. It depends how rich you are. This right here is the theater. As you can see, it is like half. It's like a half circle. If you haven't gone to an amphitheater before, there is the seats right here, and then there's the entrance. And on this side, which is being renovated right now, is where all of the theaters and the plays is going to happen. So the material of this area is made of sandstone. You can see by how beige it is. However, when it was actually made, it was covered in plaster. And plaster was created from lime, gypsum, and water. So this plaster is what makes everything look super white and super new. So if you were to travel back thousands of years, it would be amazing, and you'd be like, oh my goodness, it's so rich over here. Because remember, again, Herod owned this place. So what you see now is like it's down to its bare bones. It's all sandstone because sandstone is porous. And if we remember, this is by the water. So with water and the elements, it will deteriorate faster. That's why plaster was used to cover it. So it's amazing how it's still standing after so many years. Over here, this is my buddy, my travel buddy. His name is Panda. So I bring him everywhere with me. And then we'll continue on. Right here, you can see a bunch of white. That would be the plaster.
So that's like ancient plaster?
Yeah, that would be the ancient plaster. So they haven't replastered it. Some of it maybe, but I don't remember Yoel saying that. So yeah, we're going to enter the theater. So the importance of this is really important when you look at architectural sites, is to see any sign of important details. So right here, what is the biggest important detail that you can notice? There's an arch. So with arches, specifically like these, if you are aware of history, the arches were a representation of Roman culture or Greek culture. Somewhere around there, sometimes people confuse Greeks and Romans and think they're the same, but they're actually quite separate, even though they do collide sometimes. So it is important to remember the culture that was of the present moment when buildings were made. So again, as Garrett pointed, it's the arch. So whenever you see an arch, you would know that there's Greco-Roman culture influence. So again, this is a theater, and it's important to remember in Roman culture that entertainment is a way to teach lessons, be insightful of perspectives into daily lives, and it's also a way to show important times. But then remember, this is Roman, so it's not important times in terms of the Jewish festivals. Entertainment. So as you can see here, this is where the original seating would be. Obviously, the rails weren't there years ago. As you can notice, there are exits here. We will talk about that later. And then if I can spot it right here, there is a specific area where all of the seats aren't here. This specific area, we'll have a zoom in later, is very important. And then down here, we actually don't know what it is for, but some people think it would be for the orchestra, and other historians think that's also where prostitutes could be. So if you're aware of English culture with Shakespeare, Shakespeare has a Globe Theatre, and with their theatre, all the higher-ups would buy their seats here, and then the people who were quite poor, they would be here on the grounds. So it's interesting how theatres work almost the same. Again, so the theatre is a Roman style and not a Greek style. If it was a Greek style theatre, we would be using natural hillsides for an echo, but remember we're by the water, so there is no hills. So the Roman style, there would be artificial hillsides, which I did not take a photo of. It's just the stage. We all talked about that. And then this area could also be used for flooding, for water telling, because when it comes to Roman entertainment, they're very about extravagance and spectacular sights and everything. So water is used for to make things better when it comes to storytelling. And also remember that their wear is, they usually wear white togas. So if you mix anything of white clothing with water, you would see the skin underneath. And then usually when it comes to Roman physique, it's like abs, is really well defined. So when it comes to entertainment, white toga and water is really amazing, let's say. So spectacle, it's attractive, which is basically the entire point of entertainment. So in Roman culture, entertainment is really important and is one of the key points for their culture when you study them. Perfect. So there are social cues when it comes to entertainment. I was talking about this earlier. When it comes to the theater, there's the seats right here for lack of term, commoners. And then right here we would be seeing the VIPs, the important people sitting here. Mainly the general would take this seat right here when a show is on. And then also over here, this would be the exits. And this is where we get the English word of parade, paradoi, which is usually for the VIPs. And then the VIPs, again, would be sitting here in the middle, because that's the best seat in the house, essentially. Most important people sit in the middle. And then we get the word vomit from the word vomitorium, which is the exit right here. So basically, when you leave the theater, you're just part of the vomit. Wonderful. Good to know. So the certain spot for the governor, again, is in the middle. And then we need to remember that the reason why Herod has this place as its main base is because he is trained in Roman ways. He's the one that brings Roman culture in significant manner because, again, remember the time. I think Rome was in power. And remember that a lot of his moves were political, such as his conversion to Judaism. So Herod here had to balance Judaism and Roman rule so that when they come together, because Israel was very strategic, they wouldn't clash and there wouldn't be a revolt, which, however, did happen later on. Which one? Oh, that one. There's a lot of computers. Again, so if you were to think of this in a Jewish perspective, knowing that the theater here is about spectacle, body physique, extravagance, it's also a way for, when it comes to Romans, engaging in theater means you're also engaging with the god dedicated to the theater. So who here knows the name of the god who is basically in charge of entertainment? Pan. So Pan is another word for this one. It's a Roman god. The Roman word is for Dionysus or Dionysus. He's known for wine as well, entertainment. He's basically half goat, half human. And we will see him later on. So this question that the Jewish people had during this time is, where is the Jewish divide? If we were to take part of this entertainment, are we also worshipping Dionysus? Or when we are worshipping Adonai? So they also asked, where do you draw the line of assimilation? And that's really important to note of today's world, because we also engage in a lot of things that could be originated with pagan backgrounds. So where do we have the line of assimilation when we live in the Word and also in this world. So it's also a fun fact that Herod the Great got eaten by worms here, as says in Acts 12:18 to 25. And then if you want to see the worms claim, he was actually eaten by chronic kidney disease combined with maggot-infested gangrene in the genitals. So that's a fun fact. And then we are out of the theater. We are now out of the entertainment. And right here, it's hard to take a photo of. I don't have a drone, unfortunately. But this area is actually a half circle. And this half circle is dedicated to Caesar Augustus. So it's kind of hard to remember the differences of Caesars because everyone is named Caesar, right? So we need to remember their title. So I might start getting confused here. Sorry about that. But I know for sure this half circle is dedicated to Caesar Augustus, meaning that Caesar is also being worshipped here, and this also shows Herod's loyalty to Rome, remembering that most of his actions are very much political. Remember, right? Yeah. So it's also important to notice that Caesar Augustus was the Caesar in charge when Yeshua was born, and Caesar Tiberius was the one when Jesus died, Yeshua died. And then this is also really important to notice because it's the juxtaposition of the King Messiah and Caesar. So right here is going to be the dedication to Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate dedication to Caesar Tiberius. It says right here, Pontius Pilate was a Roman prefect who presided over the trial of Yeshua of Nazareth. The content of the inscription and the use of the Latin language hint at the level of Romanization throughout the province and in Ceasaria at the beginning of the 1st AD. Perfect. So, again, about architecture is really important because all the details here show everyone who's looking at it, especially archaeologists, what time period this thing was made. So these are called columns, and this is called a sarcophagus, and we will go into detail. So on the way to the palace, these are called Corinthian columns, based on how intricate these are, and the columns are also a way of identification of who made it based on the symbols of belief that were placed. So usually when it comes to these Corinthian columns, you would see specific symbols around here at the bottom or at the top. Right now I don't have any, but as we go on in our tour, when I'm allowed, I will show you more things. So let me keep going. The symbols would identify the culture and the faith. And then the wealth is shown through the transportation of stone, because you can't necessarily find specific types of stones in Israel. So wealth is shown through the transportation of stone because you need to, what's it called? You need to take one stone from one area and you need to you need to bring it over to Israel. So that's a lot of money, number one, to buy the stone, and a lot of money also to transport it over. So this just shows how wealthy Herod was when he took care of this. So purely a beautification to show economic power. Again, showing the palace, thinking of a palace, you really need to show off how rich you are and how powerful you are to the people who are seeing it. And then also for your subjects so that they wouldn't think of overtaking you, essentially. So there is very little marble in Israel, so all of the materials are quarried and transported. Quarried means that they have to be taken out of a stone and they have to be cut off, basically. And the sarcophagus. A sarcophagus, where do you think people would be buried? Sometimes you think they'd be on the ground, right? However, this is what a sarcophagus is for. Basically, it's a tomb. This is your coffin. We put the person in there, and that's where they deteriorate, essentially. So look how pretty that is. Okay, so we are now entering the palace, and I have titled this Wine, Dine, and Die, because basically there's two things. If you get invited to the palace, it's either it's because you're important and you actually are matter, or you're going to die. So it's one or the other. And then the columns here, as you can see, they are cut into pieces. However, when I talk about the plaster again, you actually wouldn't know that they're cut into pieces and you would think they're just one big column. But because of our location, we're actually kind of prone to movement, so we can't necessarily have one big column or else it's just going to topple over. And then Caesar's friend, someone said this. Caesar sizes up Herod in one sentence. He basically says that it is better to be Herod's pig than his friend because, again, you could be his friend, but he would invite you to the palace, and that's where he'll kill you. However, because Herod is Jewish, he can't eat a pig, therefore he won't kill any pigs. That's why it's better to be his pig than his friend. So, Cesaria Maritima is a engineering masterpiece. If Martin was here, it would be better. However, it's an engineering masterpiece because we're right by the water. And this pool right here is actually fresh water. Or it used to be, at least. It was freshwater pool that came from this well. And then it was made by Herod. Ooh. Yeah, it was made by Herod. So right here, there's a freshwater pool. You can swim in there. And you can also look at the sea. And then right here is actually a dining area. So you could imagine how rich Herod was and everyone who got invited there. It was pure glory. There's Greco-Roman culture now. The mosaics here are with Greek culture, with the gods. And then once you see geometric mosaics, which would be down here, they are made of the Hellenized Jews. So when it comes to eating, we have this sort of setup called the triclinium. It's the 3 tables of dining. So there'd be 3 tables. There'd be 1 main table, and then there'd be 2 tables on the side. And then in the middle, there would be the pretty mosaics, and they usually tell a story. So there's a palace layout. This palace has a swimming pool, as I told you before. I will tell you right now, it would probably cost $10 million to build this, maybe even more, modern day prices. There's a grand dining complex, there's a central hall, and there's 2 small rooms on each side. So this is the triclinium that I was talking about, 3 tables. 1 table in the middle. Usually the important people would be sitting here. And then the tables would be on the side. And then the food would be here. And then this would be where the mosaics would be. So that would be amazing. And then lastly, we're going to go through the arena. So if you haven't died in the palace, welcome to the arena, where you could also die. The arena is basically of a loop where slaves can come here to fight for their freedom. Essentially why I said it depends how rich you are to see whether or not you're here to watch or if you're here to fight for your freedom. Basically, it is a ring, so there would be horses and chariots, and then it would be very gruesome because you want to knock the other person out and you want them to bleed. Basically, you want them to die so that you could win. And that's also why it's made out of sand here, so that when the person bleeds, the sand would absorb the blood quite faster, and then you can see that they're bleeding, which is entertainment for other people. And then if you don't want to miss the entertainment and you need to use the washrooms are right here. And they're actually, this is your view from the washroom. So it's right here. This is your washroom. And then that is your view. So you don't miss anything at all. Perfect. So you're out from the arena. You have survived. You had fun. We are now walking outside of the arena to the palace vaults. This is the water right here. Salt water was the last thing to Salt water was the last thing to be used when making building blocks. And then palace vaults here is where all of the prosperity of the palace is stored. So, and then there's pretty flowers, but apparently these are weeds. So, and as we keep walking, we can see more examples of mosaics here. It's really gorgeous. Then we start seeing the flags and then the columns. And throughout the palace, you would see the palace baths right here, which is pretty. But also it's kind of important to remember that in Roman culture, it's more public baths. So sometimes if younger kids are there, there might be some assaults happening, but that's also not really talked about. And then as we move out of the palace, there would be the pasture right here. So remember, this is a maritime. We're by the water, so this would be ports. This pasture right here is the inner port of the area. And then the restaurants, which would be here, is the outer port. So we need to remember, again, sea levels, that the water would have been higher back then. And this would have been bustling with more boats and more vessels, and things are getting transported in and things are getting transported out. And then lastly, right here, it's another way to look at it is you can see it as another form of worship. because water is here, and then let's see, water is here, and then this could be like a sculpture of like a god. So basically Romans have their own little gods. They have their private family gods. And then also when it comes to water, is anyone familiar with the concept of nymphs? So basically there would be folklore saying that you would see nymphs around the water. And if you were nice enough, the nymphs would talk to you. So that's why I said going to the water is also kind of like a spiritual worship here. And then we make it out of there. These arches are also really important. However, they're no longer of Roman influence. Does anyone have any idea for this type of architecture? No? Perfect. So this type of architecture is from the Crusades. It's from the Gothic area because of how pointed these arches are and how more refined the arches are based on the structure. So basically the Europeans kind of stole some architecture ideas. And this is a video, but I can't make it play right now. So, and then lastly, we have made it out of the area. And then before that happens, there are 3 stages of defense. Let's say Cesaria Maritima was to be attacked. There would be number 1, poop. That would be the first line of defense. Which would be through this crack right here. They're going to take manure and then they would pull it through. And then we see the iron gate right here for protection. And then the last one would be the wooden gate. However, there is one more stage of defense, which would be this side. This is more on a slant. It's a wall, right? However, it's not a straight wall, 90 degrees. It's actually on an angle. And this is inspired by the Canaanites. And it's actually really smart. Because if someone were to attack you, they would have to let's say hammer on the wall. However, if it was straight like this, I would be able to go straight through. But because it's slanted, it would be so much harder to break it, which is why these walls are slanted. Day 1 fin. So these 2 are videos. I will post them on Facebook if you want to see them. This photo right here is of the sunrise by the Galilee, which is really gorgeous. And yeah, thank you for listening. You made it through day 1 without jet lag.